Talent management in virtual settings, right now on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features the challenges of talent management in a virtual setting. Joining us today is Senior Vice President, Global Head of Talent Development of Capital Group, Becky Porter. Becky leads the talent development and charitable giving teams at Capital Group, home of the American Funds. In her role, she focuses on organization effectiveness, leadership development and succession, and enterprise learning and development. Please welcome Becky Porter.
Thanks for having me.
Becky, it's great to have you on the show today to share some of your thoughts and wisdom around talent management. Could you talk a little bit about the role of talent management and the role that it plays in most companies?
Sure. Talent management just refers to the strategy and set of activities around acquiring, developing, engaging, and deploying talent, all in alignment with the company's objectives. So you would typically see activities like recruiting, learning and development, or organizational effectiveness, culture, performance management, career development. And there's also an underpinning and a strong link between a company's talent management strategies and their diversity and inclusion strategies.
Wow. So how does this task or these tasks change during crisis or during virtual transitions, such as the ones that people are facing quite a bit lately?
Many of the fundamentals of what we do stay the same. We're still hiring people, we still develop them, we still think about succession planning, but the way we're doing them is changing. And so when the COVID crisis first hit, we put all of our development focus on helping our employees get the resources they need to transition to work from home. And then we focused on optimizing that experience. And so we offered resources and live sessions around how to lead virtual teams, how to navigate having work and home under one roof, how to take care of yourself, how to manage anxiety. And we're now at a point where we're planning for resources that our employees will need when they come back to work. So how do you have conversations with some of your employees about returning? And some may not feel safe. Everyone's in a different place in terms of their readiness and willingness to get back into the office. And I actually think that transition back to the office will be just as disruptive for employees as it was to go out. We've also had to just update some of our practices and deliver things virtually, like orientation and interviewing, where we would always be in person before.
So are there some best practices for talent management that just don't work in virtual settings?
Yeah, I think the reality is we're going to need to figure out how to make all of our talent management practices work virtually. I don't see us completely reverting to how things were before. So we do have a tremendous opportunity in front of us to be really innovative and creative in our work. Now, that being said, there are some areas that are more challenging to do virtually. And I think of recruiting comes to mind. So while you can certainly do virtual interviewing, not everyone's comfortable making offers to people they haven't met face to face. In our development programs, we typically offer month-long development journeys to make the learning stick. But a big piece of that is the connection and the bonding that happens when you're together with people in the room. And so how do you recreate that collaboration and bonding? And I think that just the new hire experience, as you join a new company, how do you form relationships and networks and learn about the culture when you're sitting alone in your office at home versus interacting with people? So those are the three that stand out to me that are going to be particularly challenging to figure out a longer-term solution for.
So what are some of the practices that transfer quite easily?
I think the mechanics of transitioning talent management practices is fairly easily if you have good technology platforms. You can do talent review and succession meetings virtually. You just need a good facilitator who knows how to draw in a virtual crowd and use chat features and polls and things like that to make it more interactive. I think what's interesting is to think about the longer term impacts of those practices going virtual. So what do you gain and what do you lose? And I think that's where we're spending our time, where you may gain scale, where you can deliver a day one orientation to a global set of new hires, which is fantastic, or you can deliver a development program to associates around the globe. But are we actually, successful in perpetuating our culture? Is the learning sticking? How are we assessing performance in those environments? I think that's going to be the tougher piece to assess right now.
A lot of our conversation so far has been around this transition that people are making from face-to-face to virtual. But are there some practices in talent management that actually lend themselves better to virtual settings?
One of the things I've been really interested lately is in organizations that are moving to more agile business practices, particularly around their talent outcomes or talent practices. And so in that, you shift your focus from the process. So let's say performance management as a process, and you focus instead on the outcome. So instead of defining performance management as a series of steps that start with setting objectives, getting ongoing feedback, having a formal performance review, you talk about performance management as a conversation with your manager. And that helps you understand your objectives, or you get feedback to make sure you're keeping your skills fresh. You understand where your career trajectory is heading and what the options are at your company. I think that's a very different and more inspiring conversation way to talk about that versus saying we do performance management. So I think that to me, that's a practice that we need to evolve anyways. And let's design it and evolve it in a virtual setting. I also think right now we're learning a lot about our leaders. Think about our leadership bench. This is a great time to test our assessment of the potential of our leaders. How have they surprised us? Who's stepping up? Who do we think is a high potential, but maybe didn't really realize that potential over the last 3 to 4 months? I think we're going to get a lot of good data about our people right now. And again, that's going to help us just design better talent management practices in general.
So from a talent management standpoint, sometimes there's certain people that will start to shine in these moments that you might want to start paying extra attention to. So companies can learn a lot about their employees.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you have for someone heading up talent management in a virtual type of setting? If somebody, for example, came to you and said, Becky, I'm head of talent management and everything has to now become virtual. What would be your biggest advice that you'd give them?
I would say 3 things. The first is just take the opportunity to really rethink your talent management approaches and strategies. There is so much more openness across the board to try new things and work in different ways. As an example, at our company, we moved about 3,000 call center employees to be work from home in a matter of days. And in the past, that decision would have taken years. And so I think people want us to take work out of the system. I think people are seeing we've had to move so quickly during this crisis that we have an opportunity to really free ourselves from some of the maybe more cumbersome or outdated processes that we're living with in the talent space. And so this is the time to be bold and make suggestions that focus more on the value and the outcomes we're driving and less on the process. The second thing is I would say get ahead of what your companies and your employees will need. Ask the tough questions about how work will be different in the future. I don't think this is a time to stay in your lane and just focus on development or just focus on performance management. It's, how are we capturing the learnings that we're having collectively as an organization and building those into the infrastructure of the company going forward? How are we seeing some of these positive capabilities that everyone's demonstrating and sustaining those? Are we defining what our future leaders need to look like? And what do our current leaders look in terms of some of these capabilities? How is the role of a manager going to be different in a virtual setting? I think getting in front of all of those questions with really good thoughts and insights now is important. And then the third thing, amongst all of what I said, is to keep it simple. I think we are all just inundated with emails and information and suggestions, and here's a webinar you can come to. And I think our employees are feeling overwhelmed as well. They were overwhelmed with all of the information when they transition to work from home. They're going to be just as overwhelmed when they're trying to come back. And so wherever we can take noise out of the system and just create a more simple environment for people, the better.
Oh, that's great. Becky, that was terrific. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Danya, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. The first question comes from Sarah from Corona. And she's asking, how can someone in talent management evaluate employees' performance during this pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're actually talking about that right now. And, as you think about what expectations were set at the beginning of the year for companies who set formal objectives, I think it's an opportunity to really look at those and figure out what would you have expected from someone during this time. At our company, we have purported to people that they have a lot of flexibility. We recognize they're dealing with a lot in terms of their home life and their work lives colliding and all in one place. And so we are actually advising our managers to really be open in terms of how we're assessing performance, in the sense that what would you have expected them to do, their own personal situation, and make sure we're providing an environment where they feel comfortable that they can perform and do their best with whatever their limitations are. So our managers, I think that's going to be a tough job throughout the rest of this year, because it's going to be very individual conversations depending on where people are in terms of their home and their work.
That's great. Thank you, Becky. I think we have time for maybe 1 more question. Danya, do we have a second question?
We do. The second question is from Eunice from Yorba Linda, and he asks, what should graduating seniors do to attract the attention of a recruiter in hopes of landing an interview?
Well, I think now it's so interesting with the way job applications happen, right? Where everything goes online, and it is hard to differentiate yourself. I think, to me, the skills that are most attractive are people who are very learning agile, who have demonstrated that they can pick up things quickly, who are proactive, who are good team players. A lot of the skills that we do in our jobs, regardless of the industry or the role you're in, you can learn. It's really those softer skills, and this ability to be nimble and agile, open and resilient to change. Those are things, if you can highlight in an interview or in a resume, those will be really important going forward.
Great. I think that's all the time that we have, Becky. I want to thank you for being on the show with me and sharing your insights around talent management, especially as they pertain to these virtual times that we're in.
Thank you.
I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today's show featured talent management in virtual settings. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.